Lovely work.
Education, you will love this, I think. But that's our next, the impact of TM that it has had and can have on education.
This is a rough neighborhood. And it becomes a struggle for a lot of the kids. It becomes a struggle.
There's a lot of angry people in the Bronx.
When I'm with my friends, I always make sure we're looking around because you never know, things happen.
They're dealing with a difficult home situation because of drugs, because of alcohol, because of abuse, because of broken families. What they've internalized is that they're not good enough, they're not smart enough. They walk in the door feeling like they don't have a shot.
College, for most of the people here, that's their only out. And if they don't really seize that opportunity, it's possible bad things can happen.
I was seeking tools to help students deal with the realities of their social emotional life, their mental, physical changes as a teenager, and all of the demands that we were putting on them academically. And one of my teachers came to me and said, hey, there's this thing about teaching kids meditation.
When I first heard about quiet time, I did not like it at all. But when I first tried it, it came so easy to me. All teenagers, when they come into school, first period, they do not want to do nothing. They just want to sleep. It does give you rest to regenerate like a battery. Before, I held everything in, and when I couldn't take it anymore, I took it out on somebody else. Now, it just goes away now. Even the teachers, when they do quiet time, they don't want to take things out on us for saying the wrong thing. It's like they're more calm also.
I think the focus has definitely gone up. The students are way more in tune with what they have to do.
People's grades are going up, their behavior's changing, and there's just a better atmosphere around the school because everybody seems a little bit happier.
After the first meditation, I said I feel like a brand new person.
I remember the beginning of freshman year. I used to do bad in school. I was getting grades 60s, 70s, probably 80s sometimes. And then I got introduced to meditation, and my grades went up to 80s and 90s.
What starts to happen is students start to discover within themselves endless potential.
When I do quiet time, I close my eyes and I feel like all the stress is just leaving my body, all the situations and problems are just clearing out. My friends were like, you're so calm now, you're not stressed out about anything. I was like, yeah, it's this quiet time, it's so wonderful. It really has helped me a lot.
If you're going through problems at home or even problems within yourself, a couple of my friends, they have suicidal thoughts sometimes. So any problem in general, it is worth it. I feel like it could save somebody's life.
It could be the difference between that child getting into an altercation after school. It could save lives across the city.
Now we're actually getting students to apply to top-tier colleges, making that dream a possibility. I always tell the students, when you see for yourself what I see for you, when you see in yourself what I see in you, then I'm doing my job. I believe that meditation is a tool that every single human being should have, just like we teach students math and science and social studies and English, and just like we mandate physical education, we need to teach students transcendental meditation. This is something that should be foundational in education.
Before I comment, I would like to ask if all the teachers of Transcendental Meditation in the Washington, D.C. area could please stand up. These are people who are highly skilled. And a high level of certification. To become a teacher of Transcendental Meditation, it's a 6-month postgraduate level training, and these people are brilliant. David Lynch Foundation was established 11 years ago. The first mission, first purpose was to offer this to at-risk inner-city school kids. In the last 11 years, we've now provided scholarships for an estimated 500,000 kids to meditate in schools in the U.S. and around the world. Yeah. I remember some years ago when the Surgeon General said, if Americans are swimming in an ocean of stress, our children are drowning in it. Our children are drowning in it. And the 4, with the work of Norm, the 3 new panelists, are expert in the field of bringing quiet time, we call it quiet time, transcendental meditation, into public, private, and charter schools to do many things from, well, I'm going to let them tell you the story. Candy? Oh, let me introduce. I'm going to introduce. John Wolfe has come from Chicago. He's the Senior Program Manager at the University of Chicago Crime Lab and Urban Education Lab in Chicago. John, since 2012, he has worked on evaluating innovative approaches for reducing crime and increasing educational outcomes for underserved students. He is currently working on a large-scale randomized controlled trial that delivers TM to high school students in some of Chicago's most distressed communities under the leadership of Chris and Julia Bush there. I just have to tell you that the work and what we're going to hear about today, I think it's perhaps the most significant research that's going on for the Center of Excellence in Education of the David Lynch Foundation, what it promises. Rena Boone is a longtime friend. She's been a director of the Quiet Time program at the Ideal Academy Public Charter School here in Washington, D.C. for 6 years. Before that, she worked in schools in Hartford, Connecticut, in South Africa, and Jamaica. She has the great fortune. We are really, I think, here because of the principal of the Ideal Academy Public Charter School, Dr. George Rutherford, who has been a public school educator in Washington, D.C. for 48 years, 50 years, and he was the first to bring quiet time and transcendental meditation to a public school at the Fletcher Johnson School in Anacostia in 1993. I like to say that Dr. Rutherford is one of the 3 heroes I've had in my life. There was Willie Mays, there was Bobby Kennedy, and there was George Rutherford. So very, very fortunate to have Rena here. And finally, a wise and brilliant man, Dr. Bill Stixrud, who's a clinical neuropsychologist. Yeah, you have your own cheering section. Clinical neuropsychologist in Silver Spring, assistant professor of psychiatry, behavioral sciences, and pediatrics at George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. And he's also the author of a forthcoming book with Ned Johnson called Wired for Control, which will be published by Viking Books in winter 2018.
Wow. Okay. Let me start off with the research here, just because the teenage brain is just a different kind of animal. I know that's something you know about. So what is it that when you see kids like this? We saw some kids out in Oakland, is it? I mean, there's just
the Bronx.
This was the Bronx, but there were also, I mean, there are great videos of other schools that have really, something has happened there with the introduction of quiet time. What about the teenage brain makes them so susceptible to drowning as opposed to the rest of us that just kind of live with stress?
And please speak to the people watching on
yes,
it.
sorry.
So it turns out that if you grow up in poverty, by the time you're 6, you tend to have 3 times the level of stress hormones as kids who are more affluent. By the time you're 9 or 10, you tend to have EEG, you've got a brainwave activity that resembles that of stroke victims. That every year you live in poverty, you have higher stress levels and more impaired executive functions like working memory, being able to actively use your mind to solve problems. And the thing about teenagers in general is once you go through puberty, you become more easily stressed. Your stress response becomes more sensitive and you become just more vulnerable to every kind of stress-related physical problem, stress-related mental health problem. You see a dramatic surge in incidents of depression, anxiety disorders, particularly in girls, the depression part, substance use, all this stuff. And it has to do with, again, the changes in both the stress system that Norman, you're talking about, and also the reward system that Norm mentioned, that becomes very, very sensitive to peers. And so for teenagers, the importance of peers it becomes extremely high, which is partly why the brilliance of these meditation programs in schools is that I rarely hear about a kid who goes to his parents and say, can you find somebody to teach me to meditate? I mean, it doesn't happen very much. But when they do it together, when other kids are doing it, then we have a real chance to help kids really heal their brains through the practice of meditation.
Rena, bouncing off of that, you've seen the teenage mind up close and personal. When you look at your years of implementing, TM to various classes and to, as the students move on, what do you consider your biggest success?
I think my biggest success, and I've thought about this a lot because I work with the teenage brain every day. I see the challenges with the teenage brain coming to school to get an education. And I think the biggest success for me is watching the transformation and actually the miracles that take place. Getting students to sit down and meditate is a miracle. Come into my world for a moment. Come into my world at Ideal. Every day when I go to school, children are coming from all parts of the city. They get up very early in the morning to get on the vans and the buses to come to school. When they arrive, they may be tired. They may be angry. They may be upset, not necessarily ready to learn. And then we come into our multi-purpose room, and we sit down, and we close the eyes. They come in one way, and they leave out another way. They close the eyes, they settle down, all that noise, all that buzz, all that agitation settles down, and within a few minutes, the whole room is peaceful. And I sit there looking out at a sea of tranquility and think to myself, this is a miracle. And they come out of meditation, and I know when it's been a good meditation when the whole room is just quiet. When they first open their eyes, they just sit there for a moment. And I think they're ready to learn now. And then at the end of the day, they've been in school all day long, they're tired, and that teenage brain, the amygdala has gotten activated here and there, and the fight or flight response, and they're tired, they're ready to go home. They come into the meditation room with all that energy. And then within 2 to 3 minutes, it doesn't take long now, the whole room settles down. Whole room settles down. It is so still. And then when they come out of meditation, they're lively again. And they go home, but more peaceful and calm. One of my greatest successes also is I have a miracle story that I would like to share with you to show what TM can do. There was a boy 2 years ago in 5th grade, and he was very stressed. He had learning disabilities, he could barely read, hyperactive, would run around all the time. He would stick his thumb in his mouth just to comfort himself. And I taught him how to meditate. And over time, I could just see him settling down. The fact that he could start to sit in a chair, the fact that he could sit in a chair and meditate, once again, was a miracle. It didn't happen all at once, but day after day after day. And then this past January, a tragedy struck this family that this little boy is in. His young father was shot and killed in the district. And I said, this is not anything that a young child or anyone should be going through. He was devastated. And a fellow teacher and myself went to the funeral just to show support for the family so that he could know that we care. And so he was withdrawn for a while. And I continued to work with him and encouraging him. Yes, you can meditate. Yes, you can do this. Just close your eyes. Just think your mantra. If your eyes open, just close them again. And then he started to calm down again. We had summer vacation. He came back from summer vacation in August. And I could see a change in him. And I started working with him. He's meditating again. And now this young boy is walking around school poised. That nervousness is gone. He has a positive look on his face. A few times a week, he'll poke his head into my room and say, "May I meditate with you?" And I know that a life has been altered, a future has been altered, because if you give the human spirit a chance, it will thrive. Thank you.
John, since you started the research in Chicago and some of Chicago's schools, I've been really interested in this just because Chicago, as we all know, is a city under, city stress, right? I mean, this is not, as the mother of children and grandchildren who live in Chicago, I would love for the entire city to learn how to practice TM. So you are now, you're in schools with, and doing the research. Is there anything you can tell us so far about the schools that you're in and what any preliminary things that you're learning?
Sure, and I think I'll start by giving a little background on the research that we're doing in Chicago. And I think the different panels that you've heard from already have hit on it. But being a high school student is very stressful. You have grades to worry about, colleges to get into. Being a teenager is very stressful. Growing up in poverty is extremely stressful. And growing up around violence in a city like Chicago, but it's not just Chicago, it's cities pretty much everywhere across the United States face some sort of violent problem like Chicago does, maybe not as the same scale. But growing up in violence is extremely stressful. Research shows that if you grow up in underserved communities, your what psychologists call cognitive capacity can actually be lessened, or bandwidth, and that's something that Bill mentioned. Because of all the stress that your brain is under, you're actually able to function at a lower level. You're not able to concentrate and make good decisions because of all the stress. There's also research done out of NYU which shows that people who are growing up in violent communities are affected by the stress that's happening in and around their communities, even if they don't witness it personally. So students who are growing up just in the proximity of violence operate at a lower level. It's equal to about 1 week out of every month. You're functioning at a lower educational level because of the stress that's bombarding you from all directions. Now, the common public policy response to all of these issues around stress is to give schools and give young people more and more social programs that they can hopefully benefit from. The problem with that might be that if you are underwater with stress and you're able to function at a lower capacity, your bandwidth is lessened, you're not able to take advantage of all the programs that are offered to you. If you're worried because someone in your family or a friend was the victim of gun violence, how can you be expected to sit and focus on your algebra homework in first period? It just doesn't seem plausible. So we thought, in addition to offering social programs which in and of themselves probably offer a lot of good to students, they're not doing that much good if students can't engage with them and can't make the most of them because of the stress. So we thought, what if there's a way to actually work with the students to bring them back up to their full capacity and make sure that they were operating with their complete bandwidth. And so that's where we found the Quiet Time program. And the idea is that giving students a tool to unlock their full potential, unlock their capacity when they come to school every morning, so that they can not have to worry about all the stressful situations they're going through and that they're leaving when they walk in through the doors, but they're able to engage with their class. And so something you said really stuck out to me is getting kids ready to learn. How do you get kids who are, you can't change all of the issues that kids may be facing. We hope to do that in the long term, but the kids who are going through all the issues right now, they need a tool to combat that. And we think that quiet time could be that tool to unlock the potential in students and take advantage of everything else that schools and school districts and social service providers have to offer.
So I'm going to go out of order here because I want you to explain okay, so here's research that you want done. How does a school how do you bring TM to a school? Explain that process.
Rena, or both either.
Yeah.
Why don't you,
Tell me what happened in your schools. Like, how did you, all of a sudden, let's do TM, and you got all these classrooms full of kids going, what?
Yeah.
Not to mention their parents going, what? So how did that happen?
Well, I'll just say first, my school is unique because it's a public charter school, and Transcendental Meditation is in the charter of the school. So when the parents enroll their students in Ideal, they sign a form saying, my child can learn Transcendental Meditation. So we have a unique situation going on there.
So ours is very different. We're working this year in 3 Chicago public schools, high schools. The way that the Crime Lab operates, we like to do real-world policy evaluation of programs that we think are promising, but we don't just want to roll out public policy or push public policy unless there's rigorous empirical evidence about what works for whom and why. So every couple of years, we hold what are called design competitions, where we crowdsource the best ideas from schools, from cities, from social service providers about issues that we care about. So it's not that there's researchers, there's academics sitting somewhere on campus in our lab thinking up what we could do to try to help people in the areas we want to help. We actually ask people on the front lines who are doing the work, what are the best ideas that you have out there? And so we did this a couple of years ago and found the David Lynch Foundation through one of these design competitions. There was over 220 applications, and they were one of 3 selected to move into a pilot stage, because I, for one, shared a bit of that skepticism. I think we're going to have high school students do what? And they're going to do that every day, and they're going to buy into it, and they're going to want to do it, and parents are going to let them do it. And so what we did was bring the David Lynch Foundation and the Quiet Time program into Chicago last academic year in a pilot program. So we thought, before we bring this full scale to schools, we need to figure out, will kids in Chicago actually do this on a regular basis? There's very promising data that shows the program operating in San Francisco. Some members of our team said, okay, but that's San Francisco, so the meditation program in schools might work there. Does it work in Chicago? Will it work in New York? Will it work in DC? And so we wanted to first have David Lynch and the Quiet Time program really kind of prove their chops. So we said, you have a year. We picked 2 high schools with the help of CPS. So they said, these are the schools that we think could benefit from them. Chicago Public Schools. And the David Lynch program went in and delivered TM to about 100 students last academic year. It wasn't part of a randomized control trial. Students were selected by teachers, by the administration in the school. And we thought, if this can work, then we'll think about bringing it to whole schools, bring it larger scale. So after a year of the program, we interviewed students, we talked to teachers, we talked to administrators and the TM teachers who are operating in the building, and just had glowing reviews from everyone who participated. One school in particular chose a group of students that has historically had a lot of mental health issues because of the track that they're on academically and the pressures they face. And she reported that there were 0 official mental health reports out of the group of the 60 students that operated in the program. The other school, when we went to, we said, you have slots for about 60 students to participate. You can pick who they are. We're agnostic about who we're going to work with. We're just going to give this our best shot. So he said, why don't you pick my 10th graders, because they were the most difficult class for me the year before. If this works for them, I'm sold. And the students raved about the program, participated not just as part of a class, but actually sometimes had to leave class or leave lunch to go and do the meditation. So they had to seek it out because it wasn't built into the school day. So after gathering all that information in the pilot year, we worked with the public school system to say, we have raised enough funding to bring this to about 1,000 kids next year. Help us figure out who should get it. We picked 3 schools on the south and west sides of the city, historically the most violent and distressed communities in the city, where students at the school, even this year, have been victims of gun violence. And so it's something very real and pressing for the students who are participating in the program. So we're looking right now at a randomized control trial where some students in the school are meditating, some students within the school are not, and we're working on bringing it to an additional about 2,000 students next year as well, which will also be part of the evaluation.
Dr. Stixrud, you talked about how it was important, I mean, that the peer pressure, if you will, of having a lot of kids together all doing it was helpful. Tell me why, in general, TM does seem to work, certainly in these, preliminarily here in Chicago, also here in Washington, various schools. What is it that happens that clearly, I mean, some of these kids are really living lives that even adults would have a hard time navigating. Why is this working?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of mechanisms, and I think that two of the most important mechanisms explaining why TM seems to work is that in kids and in adults, if you do it, it induces this state of relaxed alertness, where you're very silent inside, completely awake. It also induces this state of brain organization, this coherence in the functioning of the hemispheres and the front and back part of the brain that is simply allows you to put things in perspective and think in a more organized way. And anything that we just know from all the sleep research, that deeply relaxing the mind and the body has enormously healing effects on mind and body. And so we see that there's very good evidence that TM lowers anxiety in kids, that it improves mood. And I think one of the most important mechanisms is that the first middle school in San Francisco that started the Quiet Time program, the Visitation Valley Middle School, I went out and lectured, and I walked through the halls with the assistant principal 3 years after they'd been doing the program. And the assistant principal said, now we're walking past the counselor's office. And 3 years ago, if we would have been walking by here, there would have been 30 kids standing out the hall, screwing around, bumping each other, and yelling and this and that. He said, now there's not a single kid there. And we know that this experience of deep relaxation improves the brain's prefrontal cortex. It allows the prefrontal cortex ability to moderate and modulate the amygdala, so that you simply have better impulse control. I mean, one of the greatest things that a kid ever said to me, one of the studies we did on kids with ADHD, a very impulsive kid, asked middle school kid, asked him, how did meditation affect you? He said, well, before I started meditating, I'd be walking the hall and somebody bumped me. I turn around and hit him. But now I've been meditating for 3 months. If I've been walking the hall and somebody bumps me, I stop and think, should I hit him or not? You know, it's just a great story. But that ability, as Cindy was saying, that ability to inhibit is extremely powerful. And I'll also say, after I took this tour of Visitation Valley, I sat and watched these videos of kids talking about their experience learning meditation. And almost every single one of them said something like, I can sleep for the first time. And arguably, sleep is the most important thing for the developing brain. And people who grow up in these underserved communities and schools have chronic sleep disruption. And they can sleep because the first time in their life they feel safe. You can't fall asleep if you don't feel safe. And by quieting down that amygdala and increasing that ability of the prefrontal cortex to regulate the amygdala, by giving them the experience that there's actually a part of them there's a part of them inside that feels safe, they can sleep.
The thing is, just let me just wrap that up, just because you said something tweaked my interest. There is good reason for some of these children to be afraid. They're in bad neighborhoods. So how does that work? It makes them more able to think that they can deal with it? Because it's not, you can't, I mean, I've never found TM to kind of change the events that happen to you. It changes how you react to events, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, the things that make life stressful can be summarized with the acronym NUTS: novelty, unpredictability, threat, and a low sense of control. And it's the low sense of control that really is the thing that's most stressful. And you think about people living in poverty, that life is very unpredictable. It's potentially threatening and a very low sense of control. And one of the things we know from the early research on TM is it increases what they call internal locus of control. You feel a stronger sense of control over your own life. You have more optimism that actually what I do matters. You see this dramatic reduction in suspensions in these the quiet time schools, because kids feel that they feel safer in school, and they feel that there must be some reason that I have some potential. There's some reason for me to go to school. I have some possibility of making a life. So I don't think, there's some evidence actually that makes the communities safer. These schools actually make the communities safer. But I also think that simply by increasing that sense of control, that I can manage life is a really big deal.
May I share a story that illustrates this
Sure.
as well? Okay, thank you. I have another story to illustrate what Bill was just talking about. In fact, I met with a mother yesterday. We have a parent and grandparent program at Ideal. And we've been reaching out in the community, teaching parents and grandparents, creating more peace in the home, creating more peace in the community. Because the children come to school and meditate, but when they can go back home and there's meditation going on in their homes, that's creating a more safe feeling for them in life, period. Well, I met with a woman yesterday, a mother, who has a daughter in 6th grade. And she said to me, I want the whole world to know my story because it is a miracle. And it started 3 years ago. I mean, three months ago. In August, this woman came into my quiet time room. Dr. Rutherford brought her to me. And she was trying to enroll her daughter in school. This young girl was suffering from severe anxiety. She had been bullied and traumatized in her other school in the previous year. She was sitting outside in the car with her grandmother, afraid to come into the school. And so the mother came and talked to me, and I told her about our quiet time program, and she lit up and she said, maybe I can get her to come inside and talk to you. So she went out. I said, tell her that in my school, I'm called Mama Boone. We're either Mama or Baba in my school. That's an Afrocentric tradition that we have. So she went outside and said, Mama Boone said she'd like to talk to you about quiet time and meditation. So the young girl said yes and came into the school. When she walked into my room, I could tell visibly that she was so stressed. In fact, she was wheezing. She just looked so uncomfortable. And I started to talk to her about transcendental meditation and quiet time. And I saw her begin to relax. And I have a famous question that I always ask my students, would you be willing to meditate? And she said yes. So I taught this young girl, I taught her mother. And when I taught the mother, from the very first meditation, she said, I feel so different. I feel so relaxed. I feel like something just got lifted from me. And then I taught the daughter. And when she came out of her first meditation, she was glowing. And the mother said she looks completely different. Well, it wasn't right away that she started to transform right from the very first meditation. But day after day after day, she began to take little baby steps. And the little baby steps were that she started to come to school for a few hours at first. And at first, she would go into the special education office and do her work. And then she began to go into the classroom with the other children. The other day, I looked into her room, and I saw her sitting there peacefully with the other children, learning. In the very beginning, the whole family was not sleeping because the girl couldn't sleep and the mother couldn't sleep. The mother had her own health challenges. All of that has transformed. And yesterday, the mother said to me, we have discovered that she has a hidden talent that we didn't even know about. She's singing now, and she has a beautiful voice. We didn't even know this. And I said to her, yes, because stress impedes creativity. You remove the stress, and all the gifts and the talents begin to emerge. And so this woman said, I want the whole world to know this. She had been taking her to Children's Hospital. She has a psychologist she's been working with. And the psychologist noticed the difference in her as well and said, I want to come and see what's going on at Ideal Academy, because this really is making a difference in this young girl's life.
Why don't you, Dr. Rosenthal, can you wrap this up for us?
Yes, I want to just say firstly, of course, all the stories are amazing. But what is really thrilling me with today is hearing 100 students, 1,000 students, 2,000 students. I think what we're seeing here is a tipping point. From way back when, decades ago, with Doc Rutherford starting off little bit by little bit, Bay Area program growing, David Lynch Foundation, huge credit is needed to the David Lynch Foundation.
That'd be you. That's your cue.
But we need partners. We need the Chicago Urban Crime Lab. We need the Dodge Foundation. We need other people to create this kind of tipping point that gives a sort of geometric progression of something that so obviously can help students, people with addictions, veterans with PTSD. I really, sitting here, feel like we're just on the cusp of an explosion. And I think we'll all look back to today and think we saw that explosion just as it was about to happen. Thank you.
I want to conclude with a few thank yous, but first I want to just make this point. None of what we're hearing today is magic. It's what Transcendental Meditation does is it just accesses a mechanism that every human being has equal access to. Doesn't matter how wealthy you are or poor, education or religion. Everyone has equal access, a mechanism in the brain and the nervous system to, on one level, to take profound rest at will. And in that deep rest, the body heals and repairs itself. It also wakes up the brain, as we heard, strengthens the connections within the prefrontal cortex, the executive functioning center of the brain, calms the amygdala. But it does that because of one thing: effortless access to the quiet level of my own self. Nothing else. I have choppy waves on the surface. I'm thinking. And I go to sleep and I try and stop thinking and I can't even go to sleep, or I fall asleep for 2 hours and then I'm thinking at 2 in the morning. Through the use we heard of a simple sound that has no meaning, and learning from a teacher, not out of a book. This isn't something that should be dealt with casually or flippantly. Learn from a certified teacher, someone who knows what they're doing, and they become your own personal teacher. Learn how to effortlessly access that, and the transformation is immediate. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was a scientist, people don't know that, he was a scientist, a physicist before he became a great meditation teacher, was one time asked by a very skeptical reporter, yeah, she hates those skeptics. The reporter said, Maharishi, you talk about this, that TM can have such a profound effect and it can transform lives and violence and all this stuff and health that had been around chronic for years and years. It's like, dial it down, be more realistic. And Maharishi said, a room can be in darkness for one night, and a room can be in darkness for 100 years. And you turn on the light and the darkness disappears. Doesn't take another 3 hours or 3 minutes. Darkness is stress. We have a mechanism inside of us, a light, which just means that calm wakefulness. Access it, it can transform lives. I am so grateful that all of our panelists have traveled far distances. You didn't ask for any money to do this. You even paid your own travel. We're very, very, very grateful that you did this. It's amazing the work, except for Dave, I paid yours, and some others. Yeah. It's amazing the work that you're doing. And Lynn Kaplan in Los Angeles and Lauren Valasek in San Francisco with their teams. David Shapiro, work that he's doing in Africa with PTSD, really transformational. Our board members, Richard Crichton and Jane Ottenberg, and Rona and Jeffrey Abramson, members of the board of directors of the David Lynch Foundation. I'd like you to meet Freda Plesser. If you could stand up for a moment. Freda is our liaison for government functions here. Ina Clark in the back, who is working with development, really great. And Kathleen, you're the one who made this all happen. Get out here, get out here, get out here. We will be having, the David Lynch Foundation will be having a strong presence through the generosity of some of our donors here in Washington, D.C., starting in January, offering programs at what's called the ARC in Anacostia, a community center, working with there's a lot of members of Congress on both sides of the aisle now who want to learn TM. So it's a hopeful, helpful time. Very, very grateful that you've all come. And if you have any questions, if you want to know more, please put this up. I'm really doing myself in, or my assistants. Bob, could you put that up, Sammy? Bob and Sam Lee, Bob at davidlynchfoundation.org. Any question about any of this, if you're interested in for yourself, meditation for yourself, and how to do that, if you're interested in work with veterans, if you're interested in working with addiction, if you're interested in work with children, Bob at David Lynch Foundation. I may not say, hi, how are you? I may just forward it, but thank you all very much for coming. Absolutely historic event.
This is something that should be foundational in education.
Before I comment, I would like to ask if all the teachers of Transcendental Meditation in the Washington, D.C. area could please stand up. These are people who are highly skilled and the high level of certification. To become a teacher of Transcendental Meditation, it's a 6-month postgraduate level training, and these people are brilliant. David Lynch Foundation was established 11 years ago. The first mission, first purpose was to offer this to at-risk inner-city school kids. In the last 11 years, we've now provided scholarships for an estimated 500,000 kids to meditate in schools in the U.S. and around the world. Yeah. I remember some years ago when the Surgeon General said, if Americans are swimming in an ocean of stress, our children are drowning in it. Our children are drowning in it.
Demands that we were putting on them academically. And one of my teachers came to me and said, hey, there's this thing about teaching kids meditation.
When I first heard about quiet time, I did not like it at all. But when I first tried it, it came so easy to me. All teenagers, when they come into school first period, they do not want to do nothing. They just want to sleep. It does give you rest to regenerate like a battery. Before, I held everything in, and when I couldn't take it anymore, I took it out on somebody else. Now, it just goes away now. Even the teachers, when they do quiet time, they don't want to take things out on us for saying the wrong thing. It's like they're more calm also.
I think the focus has definitely gone up. The students are way more in tune with what they have to do.
People's grades are going up, their behavior's changing, and there's just a better atmosphere around the school because everybody seems a little bit happier.
After the first meditation, I said I feel like a brand new person.
I remember the beginning of freshman year. I used to do bad in school. I was getting grades 60s, 70s, probably 80s sometimes. And then I got introduced to meditation, and my grades went up to 80s and 90s.
What starts to happen is students start to discover within themselves endless potential.
When I do quiet time, I close my eyes and I feel like all the stress is just leaving my body, all the situations and problems are just clearing out. My friends were like, "You're so calm now, like you're not stressed out about anything." I was like, "Yeah, it's this quiet time, it's so wonderful." Like it really has helped me a lot.
If you're going through problems at home or even problems within yourself, you know, a couple of my friends, they have suicidal thoughts sometimes. So any problem in general, it is worth it. I feel like it could save somebody's life.
It could be the difference between that child getting into an altercation after school. It could save lives across the city.
Now we're actually getting students to apply to top-tier colleges, making that dream a possibility. I always tell the students, when you see for yourself what I see for you, when you see in yourself what I see in you, then I'm doing my job. I believe that meditation is a tool that every single human being should have, just like we teach students math and science and social studies and English, and just like we mandate physical education, we need to teach students transcendental meditation.
Lovely work.
Education, you will love this, I think. But that's our next, you know, the impact of TM that it has had and can have on education.
This is a rough neighborhood. And it becomes a struggle for a lot of the kids. It becomes a struggle.
There's a lot of angry people in the Bronx.
When I'm with my friends, I always make sure we're looking around because you never know, things happen.
They're dealing with a difficult home situation because of drugs, because of alcohol, because of abuse, because of broken families. What they've internalized is that they're not good enough, they're not smart enough. They walk in the door feeling like they don't have a shot.
You know, college, for most of the people here, that's their only out. And if they don't really seize that opportunity, it's possible bad things can happen.
I was seeking tools to help students deal with the realities of their social emotional life, their mental, physical changes as a teenager, and all of the...
And the four, with the work of Norm, the three new panelists, are expert in the field of bringing quiet time, we call it quiet time, transcendental meditation, into public, private, and charter schools to do many things from, well, I'm going to let them tell you the story. Candy? Oh, let me introduce. I'm going to introduce. John Wolfe has come from Chicago. He's the senior program manager at the University of Chicago Crime Lab and Urban Education Lab in Chicago. John, since 2012, he has worked on evaluating innovative approaches for reducing crime and increasing educational outcomes for underserved students. He is currently working on a large-scale randomized controlled trial that delivers TM to high school students in some of Chicago's most distressed communities under the leadership of Chris and Julia Bush there. I just have to tell you that the work and what we're going to hear about today, I think it's perhaps the most significant research that's going on for the Center of Excellence in Education of the David Lynch Foundation, what it promises. Rena Boone is a longtime friend. She's been a director of the Quiet Time program at the Ideal Academy Public Charter School here in Washington, D.C. for 6 years. Before that, she worked in schools in Hartford, Connecticut, in South Africa, and Jamaica. She has the great fortune. We are really, I think, here because of